Welcome to another edition of Faith, Family, and Friends with Pastor Ralph. That's my friend Kori Linae Carothers. She's a musician, composer, and pianist. She is zooming us all the way from Orange County, California, and south of
Yes.
And Kori, it is good to be with you. I think the last time we talked, we had you on with another pianist, Rebecca Harold, right? And you
Yes.
were, yeah, you were doing a concert, had done a concert in Arkansas at a beautiful chapel of sorts, Christmas music, and you guys are decked out in the Christmas colors, and you did some pieces by yourself and together. It was just a beautiful time, and we were able to promote that, and then you guys talked about that. So I had been wanting to get you on alone and just to talk about your journey of music. And as I was reading your website, people could look up Kori on a website, www.koritunes.com. Not to be confused with iTunes, although her music is, I'm sure, on there. And then Bandcamp, Kori Linae Carothers.bandcamp.com. You can see all the releases that she has done. It looks like almost about 20 there. She calls herself an instrumental music artist.
Yes.
We want to get into that title, but let me just real quick, I'm not going to read the whole bio, but and you can find this on our website, folks, but a musician's path to her or his muse is sometimes an easy one. Other times it is filled with potential pitfalls or unexpected obstacles. Kori faced just that when during a kindergarten health screening at age 5, it was discovered she was deaf in her left ear. Very young peers found out and the teasing began. In addition, throughout her elementary and high school, Kori was constantly told she would never become a musician. Undeterred, and she certainly is a stubborn and an undeterred person. And I say that in the most positive way that I can. From just some of the posts that I've seen on Facebook and her travels and just all that she's gone through, even recently with some health issues with family. Undeterred, she kept learning and practicing, never surrendering her dream. Despite these discouragements, Carothers was passionate about her calling. By the time she had released her 5th album, 2015's Fire in the Rainstorm, she was acclaimed as a star in the piano genre landscape. So, Kori, with that, let's just focus on those struggles. It's interesting that I read that about you because we don't have the book with me now, but a couple of weeks ago we interviewed a gentleman who had a similar experience you did, only his deafness came by way of a fever, but he became a world champion deaf tennis player. And his story actually is out on the movie screen now. He's written a book about it. And so his story about overcoming that kind of obstacle and succeeding in a chosen field is similar to yours. You wouldn't take no for an answer. And that's
no.
Think about, what do you attribute that severity, that stubbornness, that work ethic to? Your parents, family members, friends?
My dad.
Your dad.
My dad. He gave me really good work ethic. Of course, my mom did too, but he was kind of I don't know if you can say this on Facebook, but
Go ahead.
he said to me, he goes, "Don't let the bastards get you down."
Okay. Well, there you go. That's enough to get you going. Yeah.
So and when people tell me I can't do something, okay, get out of my way.
Challenge me once too many times, so I'm going to do it. Wow. Your musical influences growing up, I read here on your bio that your family had a bunch of records that were, I guess, Herb Alpert, South Pacific 45s from South Pacific, Oklahoma, and Austin Pops, and I guess one of your idols growing up was the music of John Williams, which, interestingly enough, we were talking about him today. I was playing, I guess it was, I don't know if you've seen or heard of the Jesus Revolution movie, but the co-director, Brett McCorkle, he does a lot of his music editing, and his inspiration from John Williams' music. And all those composers had written so many things for movies, especially Star Wars. So maybe you could speak about that and how that kind of led you or inspired you to continue to work against the deafness that you heard. How was that a struggle at first? I'm sure it would have been. difficult to?
It was because my speech was, when I got excited, it would slur, so I had to take speech classes, speech therapy when I was younger. Um, and then as I got older, I didn't need those anymore. And then I just, I listened. I listened as much as I could.
Mhm.
And we had a really, this is really funny because my parents had this little tiny phonograph stereo thing. And I would lay by it and feel the sound.
Hmm.
Not only feel it, I would listen to it.
Yeah.
So sometimes I could find me laying on the floor with my head on the floor. And they're like, Kori, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just listening and feeling the music. So that's how I write. I write when I play on the piano. The piano's back there,
Mhm.
there, and my keyboard, which is next to me. Um, I can feel the sounds, and that's what helps me a lot. So now I'm getting older, and so I'm losing my hearing in my right ear. So I was fitted with a hearing aid.
Okay.
So, and that was glorious when I first put it in and listened to music on my monitors. I was crying, and every time I listen to anything that's, through my earphones or through my monitors or, really high quality stereo, I cry because it affects me
Hmm.
to the point where it's like, wow, this is amazing.
Hmm. And do you hear your own music differently uh, through the new hearing aid and than maybe you did before? And that must be a special blessing as well.
It is because I've been, Trillium was my first instrumental album
Mhm.
with Will Ackerman, and we were mixing it in surround sound in 2010,
Mhm.
and it was good, it was really good, but when I got the hearing aid and I started hearing things I didn't hear before
Hmm.
because I thought, what is that? Before I didn't recognize the sound, and so for example, on Nantucket, there's a accordion on there, and I wasn't sure what that was at first because had forgotten that accordion was on, and then
Wow.
I went, let me look at my my album
Yeah.
liner notes, and I was like, oh, hey, that was accordion. Oh my gosh, okay, that's cool. And it's been a blessing to be able to hear
Mhm.
all these things. When we were in Julian this past over the weekend, it was raining, and my husband, I was looking around, and I'm like, what is that sound? He goes, it's rain. I'm like, what?
Wow.
He goes, yeah, it's raining.
Being able to appreciate
I I just sat there and listened.
that's amazing. Wow. It
So I
sounds
think what helped was it was a tin roof, on this cabin. But wow, it was really cool.
yeah. You were able to hear what so many of us take for granted, those sounds of nature and the things that just calm us. So let's take you back to when you began to play the instrument, piano. You said, and your brothers, your siblings played other instruments. What led you to lean toward the piano?
Well, we had this old upright player piano in our basement, and it didn't work, but the piano worked. The player part
Mhm.
didn't work. So my sisters would blast the Beatles or what else? They would blast Led Zeppelin. They would blast Seals and Croft, and I started plinking out at 8. I was plinking out We Need a Little Help from Our Friends by
Uh-huh.
the Beatles, and my mom and my sisters were like, what are you doing down there? That sounds like one of the Beatles songs. And I'm like,
Oh,
it is, because I would hear it,
yeah.
secondhand. And so my mom was like, I think we need to give you, piano lessons. So that's when that started.
Hmm. And how did you take to the lessons? Did you did it, I mean, because a lot of people, I know my mother's story, she's got Alzheimer's now, but she learned to play by ear and she didn't, I guess her teacher was probably not conducive to kind of working with somebody who plays by ear and maybe making that talent better. So she quit and just kept teaching herself. And she actually picked up the accordion before she did the piano. But did you, so some amount of that was natural raw talent of being able to pick up these tunes, as you said, and then the lessons, they help assist you in getting better and your work ethic, or?
I hated practicing, of course,
Mhm.
but I would make it fun for myself. I have to admit that I was sitting at the piano with my back towards the piano and leaning upside down and playing, and my mom was like, "What are you doing, you weirdo?" And then one thing, my first teacher, she did the Suzuki method, which being able to hear and play something is a good thing, but it didn't teach me to read the notes.
Mm.
It was hearing mostly, and so that was kind of bad. So when I switched to a new teacher, I struggled because I was like, oh man, but I did it. I did it. It was, and then when I got to college, the the professors I had, I was a music major, and one of the professors, he's a great musician, could not teach theory because I did not understand it. And I was talking to my classmates. I'm like, do you guys get this? And they're like, no. So
Yeah.
it was terrible, but I had really good piano teacher in college. She was amazing.
Mhm.
And then I didn't graduate, but I moved to San Diego and married Mister there. And I met a lady who I'm going to botch up this group. It's called the Associated Royal Schools of Music, and they're based out of London. She was a teacher
Mhm.
in the U.S. that was certified to teach through their school.
Mhm.
And she, by far, Jody Jensen is her name,
Mm.
she was by far the best piano teacher I ever had, and I loved her for it. I've gotten out of touch with her,
Mm.
but she really helped me hone my writing skills and being able to read music.
Wow, great. So when that happened, you began to kind of go to a different level. What kinds of songs or sounds came into your head and your spirit, your soul, your mind, your emotions that led you to begin to compose? Could you just sit right down with a melody and do a piece right away? Did it come to you in pieces over time? How did that creative process happen for you?
Well, when I was 14, that's when I started writing because I was an emotional teenage girl,
Mhm.
and I was going through a lot of things anyway. And so that's when I started writing. But when I hit college, the nature and my memories with my grandfather, my mother's dad, would all come into my head. And then I found out that my grandmother would improvise. This is my dad's mom, would improvise in the silent movies,
Wow,
playing the piano.
that's cool.
So she would completely improvise everything she was playing.
Wow.
And so I'm really very grateful for that because that's given me, today I sat at the piano and started playing a new piece,
Hmm.
and it's called I've named it What Matters Most.
Hmm.
What Matters Most.
Hmm.
And I would play it, but I am not sure if my system would allow me to, and I can't turn
Yeah.
the I have a weird setup right now.
Now, what would, let me just guess, what would uh, compel you to title that new piece? And then we can ask about whether you think it will come out on a new release. Is it that the piece is reflective and maybe calls listener back to memories of childhood or poignant experiences of life, or what?
Experiences of life. The last 5 or 6 years, especially the last 3 years, have been, as you know, very difficult because of COVID. And we were so separated, and our whole family were all together, and that was really hard on all of us because some of my kids are really more social than others. And then they're young adults, so they didn't really they weren't crazy when they were 15, 16, but when they turned 18, it was an entirely different story. So that was a struggle, and I learned, I was really hating being a mother because of that. I was just not happy. And then one day I was just listening to a talk that was given by one of our church elders, and it was called "What Matters Most," and it made me think about my family, and my family matters most, and of course God does too. But they all have moved back home for different reasons, and it's been a joy to have them home.
That's great.
And it's just, they are such funny kids. I love having them around, and they've gone through some pretty hard things. And as an older parent now, they raised me instead of me raising them, and I feel like I'm a better parent now, and I could be a friend right now and help them and be supportive.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Because we never stop being that mom or dad, do we? No matter how old I
No.
Yeah. And your story too about that song, I'm sure you have other pieces that connect you to family, whether it's your growing up family or ones you've raised. How many kids do you have?
We have 4.
4? Okay. We have 3.
Yes.
As I was telling my kids in writing today, I've got 5 giggly 9th and 10th graders that we've been working on writing prompts, and then we'll do a story aloud and keep passing it on. But I was telling them, you need to connect with the thing that inspires you, that will unlock the muse within you when you write. I try to say it in their way that they would understand, maybe not quite the way I just said it, but, and then of course I use the model that for me anyway has always been helpful. The Waltons, John Boy, his writing was just about what he knew to be true, his family growing up, and that unlocks, for me anyway, and I think for a lot of us, it sounds like for you too, that unlocks that connection, emotional connection that we have to the things and to people that are nearest and dearest to us. And so it becomes therapy, it becomes beauty. I say therapy because when you lose a loved one, it's the greatest thing to be able to either propose a piece like you, or write a poem, a story about, like I did about my dad several years ago before he passed of cancer. And it's a gift from God, and it's something to be thankful for and to be able to share it with other people. Would that be accurate for you, or am I kind of way out there?
Yeah, it's the same for me. I mean, the Christmas album that I released last year was for my immediate family and my mother. My mom passed away last December, and but the music, it's like traveling in time, to where I have been, where my kids have been, and hopefully that, I know that several of my fans have told me that it's nostalgic to them, because that's how they, and I was hoping to convey that. I was just off surgery. I had major surgery in May of 2022, and it was the recovery was brutal, and here I am like several months later in Vermont. Wow. Recording this album, and it was tough for me, but Will and Tom were amazing.
They're amazing.
And Susan too, but they were so supportive, and their family to me, and it's just, I couldn't have done it any better than then. You know, but people ask me, you know, would you have waited? No, no. This was one of those times where I had to record it
Mm-hmm.
because it was, the feels were all in here. I needed to do that.
That's amazing. Kind of like the prophet Jeremiah, who said about God's word, it was in me and I couldn't withhold and let it out. There are times we have to let out the news or whatever it is that God has put in our heart, what he's put our hand to. And so it sounds like you had that kind of experience. And so I think it's interesting that you, and there's probably a word for that, I don't know, but when the listener feels almost psychically, if I can say that without sounding, I don't know, weird, but what the author or composer intended without anything having been said. Like you said, that listeners, your fans, it was nostalgic, but it sounds like exactly what you felt when you composed it and put it together, produced it. I think of an example of the first time I heard Ashkan Farewell from Ken Burns' Civil War series. And I'm like, whoa, it hit me like a ton of bricks, just an instrumental piece. It was even before they dovetailed the letter from the general, farewell letter before he died, which they put voice over and made it look like he was singing along with the music underneath. I just heard the instrumental, Jay Unger and Molly Madison, and my feelings about it, and the tears started coming, like, what is this? And so I read the critique of that, and everybody, without exception, seemed to feel that way. They thought it was a song that was already written years ago when this happened, and it was, of course, written for the Civil War series, for Ken Burns series, and it's been played so many times. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it really does touch on that uncanny psychic kind of thing that happens when somebody creates something and they don't realize that the intention and the spirit of that kind of is like a vibe. I know it sounds weird to maybe some people who are just tuning in, maybe who aren't into the arts and these, but I just think it's real and it's beautiful, don't you?
It is real. I mean, for example, Past 3 o'clock is a song that's supposed to sing very sprightly. You just go, past 3 o'clock, you know, bouncy.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't matching the vibe of the album. So I sat and thought about it, and then I started playing it, you know. It's like it was a memory, you know, just one hand. And then Tom added the keys, synths, and of course Charlie Bisharat played violin, and it was talking about, for me, for my family, we would, for 20, 30 years, we would go to the theater in Orange County. I'm trying to think of the name right now. South Coast Repertory? Yeah, South Coast Repertory, to watch A Christmas Carol on stage. And they would sing that song, and then they would sing Wassail, too. And so when I played that song for the family once it was mixed and mastered, we were all crying. And then I've had people tell me, especially Will was like, this makes me, it reminds me of a song that I listened to when I was younger, and it was like taking me way back, and that's what it was doing for him. So that's what I wanted with that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing when we can have that kind of feedback and not just, oh, that was nice sound, or appreciate the skill with which you played or your composition itself, but that you can actually take the listener to another place and time and affect them in such a way that they're well affected. They're you know, it makes an impact, some kind of. I think music of all the arts, and I have to say this because I'm not very musical. I sit on my cajon at church or at school with the kids, and I'll bang on that a little bit. But music is just a common denominator. You know, whether we can produce it or listening to it, it's such a mnemonic device that we remember, and our emotions be coupled together in such a way that you know, it's no wonder that it was one of the highest creations that God made. for us to be
Agreed.
back. So, of all your projects, and let me just look on the site here and see, on a cold frosty morning, because that's the one you just mentioned that was done up in Will Studio, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the most recent one. And so if we were to look at the instrumental music escape artist, is there a chronological way? Because next to that is Winter's End. We've got Remember featuring Keith Ritchie, New Sunrise. That's Imaginary Road Studios as well. Alternate mix. Down through. Is there any that are special to you besides the one that you just finished and was a marvelous release? And Road Less Traveled, I know I've listened to that quite a bit, and I've appreciated several of the selections there. What would you recommend to our listeners, audience tonight?
Oh.
If they're feeling kind of out of it and need to be brought to life, or maybe they want to go back in time and remember, and maybe your songs, compositions can evoke a reminiscent type of atmosphere.
Well, oh gosh, I think Trillium is my favorite, and there's the reason why is that I went and took the album to Nashville to work with Jeff Silverman. He's the bassist for can't think of it, Rick Springfield. And and this guy is so good at what he does. He is so intuitive. So we had some mixes there, and then prior to that, I had emailed Will to see if he would be interested in recording my album, and I hadn't heard from him until I think it was like June, maybe May, and he said, and I had this already, my plane tickets and everything already scheduled with Jeff Silverman. So I really think that this album, and then I got this opportunity to go work with Will. So we took all the mixes, and then Jeff and I contacted each other, and we did the EP of mixes that he did. And so I think that was a really fun one. It's a great escape because you're going to Native American, you're going to Nantucket, you're where else? You go to, it's just crystal fields, Carpe Diem, get you, started in your day. That one was written in mind. When I really love history, and so I was thinking of, I'm going to slaughter her name, Boadicea from Roman times, where she fought. She was, she was from the UK. What is UK now? And she fought against the Romans. And so, and to me, as a woman, I was thinking of how we as women, we're nurturers. We help our kids, and we move forward. And I really feel that piece really does it for me, and gets you going. And I've had a lot of people tell me that.
That's amazing. Wow. So when you put together the idea of an album, I mean, over how long of a period of time does it all come together? The mixing, the production, and of course promoting it, pressing the CDs, getting it out on the internet, digital, all told. I mean, it's quite an effort. It's a labor of love, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. I sometimes lose my mind. When last year I had an artist lined up and that fell through, and I had another artist lined up that fell through. So I had like a week to put something together for On a Cold Frosty Morning. So that is one of the things that can happen. It was one of those things where you're like, oh, I only have a week to put this together. And I didn't know how to do it. I mean, I learned to get the bits and the pieces into a PDF and sent it to the manufacturer, and he put it in like the template and everything. But that was a big learning experience for me. I mean, I know a lot of stuff about this kind of thing, but that was one thing I didn't know, and it was very tricky for me.
Yeah.
But as an independent musician, you do everything.
Yeah, you know, evidently. And I've talked to some independent producers. We just had Rob Grabdow from The Year of the Dog, and I think it was David Helling that did a story, a movie about Abraham. And some of these film producers coming up, they're doing the script writing, the producing, the directing. Because if you want to get your piece out there, you've got, you know, to begin with, do a lot of your own work, the crowd funding as well. Do the demands of the constraints of time and dates, do they inhibit your creativity? Or for some people, I know it actually generates more creativity. For me, it would be, although I did write for a local newspaper, and those deadlines, sometimes I actually wasn't able to produce, and it surprised me. What are your thoughts about that? Do they inhibit?
No, deadlines don't bug me.
Good.
I mean, yeah, sure, I'm stressed, of course.
Right, like
We're all stressed,
Yeah.
but you know, but it just makes it more real and interesting to me. I don't know how to explain that, other than it's one of these things where, oh yeah, you know, I did that. I can do this. All right, you know, that happened. Let's not, you know, get our feathers ruffled. But it is doable. It is doable. If you have a deadline, it is doable. It's always doable. And you just have to pick and choose the things that you do each day so that you're not killing yourself.
That's a good way to put it. Like, discipline yourself so that I'm going to get this much done, give myself this much time, then put it on the back burner, come back to it. I think probably we don't give ourselves enough credit when we think something isn't good because of that deadline. We'll look back and say, hey, that wasn't too bad. And it develops an inner confidence that can be built upon at a later point in time, maybe. So at least that's been that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I help other musicians. That's another thing I do, kind of a side hustle. I build websites, and if they're, I'm helping people get their social media and their artist accounts into their hands, and you know, some of them don't want to do that, so I do it for them. And you know, I'm helping some with marketing, and I kind of surprise myself sometimes, like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, but it's kind of like this director. I can't remember his name. Movie director, and he was talking about how he just graduated from Cal State, Long Beach, and he applied for this job. He didn't know anything about what this, because his degree was not in film. And he just said, well, I just took the job and said I could do it, and he did it, you know. You know, and that's, you know, that's what I said.
Yeah.
You know, I told people, you know, one of the things I've done is rebuilt Will's site and his website. So
That's cool.
I said, hey, oh yeah, I can do that. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And so now we're in the middle of upgrading it to Squarespace 7.1. So it's so much easier than when I had to do it in 2018. And yeah, I mean, I just said, yeah, I can do it. Sure. You know, and in my head, I was like, boy, you are an idiot. And I did it.
Yeah.
You know, you just got to dig in there and just do it.
Yeah, put
you know?
yourself out there and see what you and God and talents that He's given you can do, and not be shy, because if you don't ever try, you'll never know. And I think it's a wonderful thing to encourage other people that are getting into music, actually probably building their confidence by having you come alongside them and offer advice or the services that you have. And are mostly these musicians or any number of other creative avenues in terms of the web?
Mostly musicians. I had one guy that is he does paintless dent repairs, so I built a website for him,
Cool.
And that was really fun. It was something, that to prove to myself that I could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, excuse me. And yeah, I don't get a lot of other industries, but I'm sure I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to be very careful with my time because I still have to practice. I still have to do my own things. I still have clients that are depending on me to get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really interesting. I've never been able to. I've never been this organized. Let's put it that way.
Been forced to be more organized. I can relate to that too, because when my wife and I got married, I was the least organized, and over time you have to work against those weaknesses that you have to strengthen what strengths you do have. Do you so what do you do in terms of like live performances? Do you still concerts, playing with other people here and there? You just focus mostly on studio work and helping others create their.
I just focused on studio work and helping others. Sure, I'd love to perform more. I get way too nervous when I perform, and I don't know why that is. I mean, I am an introvert extrovert, so I have two things warring with each other.
Yeah.
I did something last year when I flew out to Arkansas and performed with Rebecca, and that was huge for me. I don't even like driving to Los Angeles. Driving around here makes me anxious.
Yeah. People.
But
I couldn't. I can't imagine driving through LA. I have a hard enough
yeah,
time
I mean,
in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So, yeah.
I know where that is. I grew up in Minneapolis.
Yeah. So we're right in the middle of those two cities, right in corn country, which I'm happy with. When I drive to work, I'm glad it's in the morning before all the traffic gets crazy. But well, Kori, it's been great having you. I know it's probably difficult, as you said, to get on your piano there. We had talked about maybe playing a piece, but maybe some other time we'd stay connected and want to let people know about your website. It's www.koritunes.com, and you can find on I guess it's off that website that I had gotten to this other, the Bandcamp, where they can see,
Yeah,
and they can actually purchase sheet music. And yeah, wow, this is really very user friendly.
yeah,
And an instrumental music escape artist. I think we all need this
yes,
kind of music in our lives, and the kind that I guess Will and others have made more popular, what we call the new age genre. I'm not so sure how accurate that is. I'm not so sure the title was a big deal, but to me, it's like, wow, I could just listen to more of it. And I don't think a typical radio guy like me and people like all kinds of other music, sometimes you have to think about that. That's there among all the other things that you listen to, but it really is soothing, meditative, and it brings you to a place that can make your day brighter, better, maybe deal with some stress. So,
hey, thank you. I appreciate that. I really love that you had me on here. We've been trying to get together and do this.
well, it
So
finally worked out. And so you can also, folks, you can email her. That email to subscribe is, I think, off that website. Is that correct? Where it says contact? Or
yeah, it's in the join section.
yeah.
Yep.
And I encourage my
Yeah,
audience and listeners tonight, don't limit yourself to one kind of listening to music. Spread yourself and broaden your horizons. And you don't know what God will bless you with when there's all this other kind of music in the. And I know kids, as I mentioned early on before I think we officially came on, kids will be kids, as you said, and I was glad of your response. It isn't funeral music; it's good music. It's good stuff. So, Kori, thanks for being our guest tonight, and we'll stay connected. Okay.
all right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Take
God
care.
bless you all. Have a good evening.